Story 1. So I've posted before about my safety vest. Due to being in a wheelchair and people around where I live being utterly vapid, knuckle-dragging, and mouth-breathing Neanderthals that don't pay attention, I'm pretty much forced to wear this high-visibility yellow-green safety vest. Where I run into my most constant issue is at a local supermarket. It's owned by Kroger, but locally, we know it as Fred Meyer. Their trolley boys, cart wranglers, all wear near identical safety vests to mine. Only theirs actually have black trim added to the vest, along with Fred Meyer plastered on the left breast and the back. That, and the employees actually have name tags on. I look like a biker by comparison with my beard, heavy tattoos, and all black clothes. I should also point out that I'm a voice actor. When I'm out in public, I speak with a posh, North London English accent, as I've found that due to implicit bias, people tend to treat me better. This comes into play here. This event happened on Friday. I headed out to perform what I call the double whammy, picking up my prescriptions from the pharmacy inside Fred Meyer and doing a bit of food shopping. I waved or greeted my regular employees and managers, as I'm in there so much and so often that I'm a pretty recognizable face. Between my, as I'm told, natural charisma and my appearance, I'm often greeted back warmly, or they greet me initially with politeness and a generally friendly atmosphere by the staff at my supermarket. I had wheeled my chair into the soup aisle. There were so many delicious options that I couldn't decide what to get. I can be a bit indecisive, and trust me when I say, never shop hungry. I don't think I was in the aisle for more than 5 minutes when I heard that throat clearing and ahem emanate from behind me. I ignore it because I've no idea if it's meant for me or what. It happens again, and I continue to ignore it. That's when this lady grabbed the handles on my wheelchair and spun me around. It took every ounce of effort not to turn and swing on her because I had no idea who she was or her intentions. But obviously she had no qualms over grabbing someone's wheelchair and maneuvering them against their will. Before I could say a single word, our Karen in this situation started to shout. Hey, when a customer is trying to get your attention, you don't ignore them. I have been trying to get your attention for minutes now. She hadn't, and I don't like your attitude. I take a deep breath and do my best to unclench my hands from the armrests of my wheelchair. Madam, I am sorry if I've offended you. I hadn't, but I must inform you that I was cut off due to my mental quirks and conditioning as a child. Anytime I'm interrupted, I get shut completely down, and I can't speak until the other person stops talking, so I went silent. I don't want to hear any of your excuses. Just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can get away with being an inconsiderate jerk. The world doesn't revolve around you that's rich. And there are other people in the world far more in need than you. I have half a mind to wheel you over to the service desk and report you to management. I waited a couple of beats, waiting to see if her rant was going to continue, but it didn't. She gave me a look that I could, without any measure of difficulty, correctly identify as a "your move" glare. I take another deep breath. Mom, firstly, it's illegal, socially irresponsible, and outright tactless to manhandle a person's disability conveyance without their consent. That counts as assault. While yelling and screaming at me isn't illegal per se, I don't appreciate it. Tell me, Mom, what incentive do I have to assist you at this point? I don't work here. Look me over. I don't have a name tag on. I'm in black jeans and a t-shirt. That's clearly not uniform. I'm just wearing a safety vest for my safety. Karen looked like she was about to blow her skull cap with the force of Mount St. Helens, Krakatoa, and Tambora combined. I honestly don't remember what she said next. It was something about the typical "how dare you" stacked with her rant about disabled people always thinking they can get away with anything just because they're crippled. That was when she lived up to her threat. She stepped around me, grabbed the handles, and began to push me. I was so bewildered that I froze because I never in 1,000 years would have thought she would actually do this. Now I could have pulled the brake handles on my chair, but that would mean I'd have to take my hand off the merchandise basket in my lap, which would cause it to slip out once we stopped abruptly. Top that off with the fact that Karen would smack into my back and the back of my head, and I didn't want that. Two of the regular checkout attendants at the self-checkout area notice me being pushed against my will towards customer service. I can just catch one I'm more familiar with for the purposes of this story. Let's call him Owen. And Owen immediately gets on his radio. Before I could do anything more, we were at the desk. Karen immediately starts slapping her hand on the counter in that typical, "Hey barkeep" kind of manner. A manager, a woman in her late 20s or 30s we'll call Amanda, turns to Karen. Amanda is quite tall and loaded down with Marvel Comics tattoos, and we're very familiar with one another. Karen launches into a full-blown tirade, accusing me of this, that, and everything from incompetence to an all-out disregard for customer service. Amanda just blinked and said, he doesn't work here." "What do you mean he doesn't work here? He's wearing a safety vest, and your employees wear the same ones." "Well, ours say Fred Mayer on them. We also issue name tags for all employees for transparency, so if you have an issue, you know who they are. He is a customer. He's in here at least 4 times a week." I could hear the hamster wheels turning in Karen's head. "So, he doesn't work here? Let me speak to the store manager just in case." Amanda sighed, picked up her phone, and began to call the store manager. However, that call didn't finish, as the head of Fred Mayer's security, let's call him Clark, came striding over, looking quite pissed. Clark is a mountain of a man, 6'5", 250 pounds, and built like a lumberjack. "Mom, what are you doing to this man? You really just grabbed a disabled person's wheelchair and moved them without their consent." "Well, that wasn't a question. You don't do that. Not at my store." "But can it? You need to come with me right now." If looks could kill, I'd be dead twice over between Karen's, "You little jerk" glare and Clark's, "You're done messing up" look meant for Karen. Karen was escorted off to the security area in the back, sputtering like an old Edsel. Amanda asked if I was all right. I said I really wasn't, that things had been difficult for me this last week. I won't disclose them here. And this really spiked my anxiety. I'm just gonna go home. Amanda did her best to comfort me. She stepped out of the booth and patted me on the shoulder. Owen, the self-checkout attendant, also asked if I was okay. I said I wasn't really. He offered, if I was comfortable, to push me back out to my car. I accepted. Amanda gave me a card and told me that when I was ready, I could use that number to have my groceries delivered, and for my trouble, she'd waive the fee for delivery. I thanked her and said that would be best for now. Owen wheeled me out to my car, helped me get my wheelchair in my trunk, and I drove home. Edit. At the behest of several readers, my partner, and my immediate friends and family, I've set up an appointment to speak with the store manager, Clark the security lead, and my local sheriff to go about filing official charges. Update. I attended the meeting with the manager who was on duty at the time of the incident, Clark, the security guard leader, my lawyer, and my local sheriff. As of this moment, the matter is now out of my hands. The sheriff's department is moving ahead with an arrest, and my lawyer is working on a prosecution. I won't and can't disclose the details of the civil part of the case until the matter is considered closed. For the wonderful people who suggested I file kidnapping charges, it turns out there's a specific charge for what she did. It's called transporting. Transporting is the act of manipulating an individual through some means: intimidation, physical manipulation, or threat from one place to another against their will. In my area, kidnapping requires prolonged detention. As she ultimately pushed me to the kiosk and then let go of my chair, legally speaking, she had no further control of my movements, and it didn't count as kidnapping. My lawyer and I are working on the transportation charge at this time. Clark and nice manager, as well as some of the clerks that witnessed, all handed in statements to the sheriff on my behalf. He isn't a lawyer, but says there's a mountain of evidence that makes it highly unlikely she'll squeak away without some charge sticking. Story 2. I let my father and his wife live free for years in my house that I inherited from my grandfather. I lived somewhere else. He had to follow one rule to live free in the house: to not touch my room and my grandfather's office. I paid for everything except for their food and entertainment. After living there for 7 years, he thought he was the owner of the house. A few weeks ago, he let his stepdaughter move in without consulting me. There was an empty room for her, but he wanted to give her my room. He had the courtesy to call me and tell me to get my things out of my room so she could move there. I refused and told him she could use the empty room, but I guess it wasn't enough. I went to the house only to find that he changed the locks and was not going to let me in unless I agreed to what he wanted. Long story short, I kicked them out, lawyer and police involved. I thought my father's misdeeds were over as the house was the last thing that was keeping our relationship alive. But I was wrong. We hadn't heard from him until a few days ago when he showed up at the house. I wasn't there, but girlfriend was. My GF told me that my father was there to tell us that since we are now living in the house, we have to host them for the Christmas holidays. Not only that, he gave her a list of the food they wanted and the gifts they expected to receive. My GF told him to go away before she called the police. I again thought it was over, but I was wrong again. Yesterday we received another visit from him. Apparently, he called my mother to invite her to spend the holidays with us. She blew him off and told him she will take us GF and I to Europe for New Year's Eve. He had the balls to demand she take them too. My mother just hung up. Mind you, this was the first time they had spoken after divorcing 16 years ago. He came to the house to demand I convince my mother to take them too, or that we pay for them to go with us. At this point, his attitude stopped being disappointing and turned comical. My GF and I just laughed at him. We laughed so hard that we didn't notice when he left. I can say that we didn't have the best relationship, but he wasn't entitled. I mean, it was already clear why my grandfather, his father, was completely disappointed in him. But it seems that he wants to take it to another new level. I don't know if he will stop, but I hope he does for the rest of the year. Edit. I have a security system. There are cameras everywhere. I know if he is there. I have other properties, my tenants and people close to GF and me. Even my neighbors know what to do if my father approaches them in my name. I doubt he will try to break in when we're not here. When I evicted them, my lawyer and the police were more than clear that he could face serious problems if he tries to enter the house or any other of my properties. Unfortunately, in my country, any kind of restraining order is pretty much useless. It is more helpful to call the police right then and there, and he knows I have no problem calling them. Update: a little family mess and my father strikes again. But now he got more than he asked for. After the last incident with my father, everything was quiet and my GF and I left to Europe. Christmas passed and there was no sight of my father. My friends that were taking care of the house reported no incidents. Everything was going well until I received a call from my uncle father's brother on December 28th. My uncle called me to tell me that he's leaving the state and is selling his house. He asked me if I was interested in the house because he was pretty desperate to leave. He didn't tell me the reason why he was leaving, and I didn't care. What matters to me is that he was desperate, and this was the opportunity to fulfill my grandpa's wish. Before I continue, I have to give you some context. My uncle's house was my grandfather's childhood home. My grandpa gave it to him, but later regretted it. He left me the task of recovering it, and, if I succeeded, to give it to my cousin Marie, my uncle's daughter from his first marriage. He never recognized her, and that is one of the many reasons for my grandpa's regret. My uncle doesn't know that I have contact with his daughter or that I know everything that happened in the past. If he did, he wouldn't sell me the house. Yes, he is that petty. Now, I decided to use the family card and my uncle's desperation to get the house cheap. I know more or less the value of the house, so I made him an offer way below the real value, but that I was going to pay him in 3 installments. My uncle declined because it was too low, and because he is not coming back. What he really meant is that he is not going to contact me again. I told him that if he could wait until my return January 3rd, I could pay him the same amount in one go. But I would also take care of the legal fees and his moving expenses. Meanwhile, he just needed to pack his things, have his paperwork ready, and everything would be done that day. Surprisingly, he immediately agreed. We returned, and I could buy the house without problems, and my uncle left the same day. The next day, I called my cousin to tell her to come as soon as she can to my country. She lives in Europe, because there is one more thing that my grandparents left to her. She came a few days ago, and I gave her the house and the rest of the money. She had to stay a few days to deal with paperwork, and in those days, who decided to appear once again? Yes, my father. Unbeknownst to me, my uncle had another buyer, and that person was my father. My father asked my uncle to wait a few days, so he could gather more money. When he got it, he called my uncle, but he already sold me the house. My uncle, in order to avoid dealing with my father, told him that I bought the house. My father, knowing that he can no longer approach my house, decided to go to my new one. But he was going to receive a surprise. He knocked and demanded that I give it to him. But no one is in there for the moment, so he decided to break in. Yes, he did. We saw everything through the doorbell camera. My cousin doesn't speak our language, so I was the one who called the police in her name. Thanks to the area where the house is and the fact that my cousin is a foreigner, the police took action faster than the previous times. It is a pity that I don't have a photo of my father's face when he discovered that the house wasn't mine. It was glorious. My cousin, with my lawyer's help and mine, pressed charges, and combined with my father's previous actions, he will spend a few months in jail. Thanks to a few people, I was able to find out why my uncle was desperate to leave. He pissed off his wife's family, like really bad. I sent him a text telling him that if he likes to ratting me out to my father, I can do the same with his wife's family, so he better not come back unless he wants to play stupid games. He blocked me after that, lol. He already told me he wasn't coming back, but I better make sure he doesn't. In the end, if my cousin decides to keep the house, this will benefit her since she doesn't want to cross paths with my uncle. So yeah, the year started off with a bang. I pretty much got rid of my so-called family for what I think is forever, and can finally start building one with my GF without the worry of unwanted people showing up. Story 3. I am a 23-year-old nanny and have posted entitled parent stories from that job. But I do also hold another position as a cashier at night weekends, and I finally have one from this job. So I work as a cashier at a 24-HR grocery store, and at this particular store, while we do technically have a corporate office and are a chain in a way, we are privately owned, and the employees are considered the owners because we invest part of our pay into the company. And while we have management and supervisors, we are given broad discretion with denying service and throwing people out. Basically, if you have a good reason, and they can see it in our cameras, there is a good reason we are good to go. Okay, now for the story. It was a busy Saturday afternoon just a few days ago, and we were packed to the point the lines are wrapped around aisles. So it is loud, busy, packed and hot. I'm tired and see it's only about 30 minutes till my shift ends, and I'm trying to keep up my nice smile and customer service voice. Briefly to my side, I hear a kid yell. He looks about 3-ish. Not like tantrum, but like just angry, trying to get mom's attention. I ignore him because kids having tantrums or getting angry is normal. I start talking to the lady in front of me, and I hear the kid, who by the way was actually quite sweet. He yells again for mom. Moom, I want my juice. Now he was yelling, but it was no way close to a tantrum or a fit. His family was the next in line. Frankly, if he'd had been in a different line, I probably wouldn't have noticed at all. In my opinion, he was more like getting the mom's attention. And his mom, entitled mom, just snaps. She turns around, grabs him by his shoulders, goes nose to nose and screams as she shakes him back and forth. You will not behave like this, you brat. I'm so tired of this. If you do not stop, you will get a beating when we get home. Now I was shocked, and so was everyone around. She did not say punishment or even spanking, she said beating. Now I was about to tell the lady in front of me to excuse me while I talked to the mother, but she jumped in so fast. She went up to the entitled mother and said, how dare you talk to your son like that? He is a child, and you should never put your hands on him or threaten him and then embarrass him in front of everyone. I was proud this lady said something, but I was still going to a pain. I paged for a manager in the process because I had a feeling this would go bad. Entitled mother starts yelling back, She has the right to do whatever she wants to her son. She could spank, beat, and yell as she saw fit. Now I jump on verbally. Ma'am, I need you to take yourself and leave the store. Your children and husband who BTW did nothing during this can check out, but you need to leave. Excuse me, she yelled. You need to leave. We do not tolerate abuse of children or other customers. You have some both by screaming at this woman. I turned to the other woman, and as much as I didn't want to have to say, Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but let us handle this, I had to say it. She wasn't mad, and she stepped away to bag her things. I turned back to the mom, and she is losing it. You can't do that. I have the right to shop here. I demand to see a manager, blah blah blah. I swear she reaches a pitch only dogs could hear. At this point my awesome manager shows up. Hey op, what's going on? Before I can speak, entitled mother speaks up. This witch won't let me check out because she doesn't like how I discipline my child. That's not true, manager. What happened was... Before I could finish, he spoke up. Ma'am, we do not tolerate name calling in our store, and I need you to be quiet so I can hear from both of you. He turns to me. I then rattle off the story and his eyes widen. Mind you again, it's a busy day and other customers are around listening, and about 3 or 4 people jump in to defend me. Thankfully my manager listened too. He turns to the lady and her family. Ma'am, I need you to leave this store. Your family can finish checking out, but you need to leave. If you don't, I'll call the police. Frankly, you'll be lucky if I don't do that anyway with the threats you keep making. She tries to stand up for herself, but my manager just escorts her out. The family just follows after her. Without their food, you'd think this was the end, but nope. About 15-ish minutes later, after I fill out a report with my manager explaining everything, I head outside to get in my car and head home. I'm on the phone with a friend trying to explain what happened with the lady, but as I walk outside, I see a police car outside with no lights. I thought it was weird because I didn't see anyone get caught shoplifting that day. So I shrug and move on, and as I reach my car, I hear it. That's the girl, officer. She's the one who assaulted me and refused to let me shop here. I turn and see the woman from earlier with her kids and husband with 2 cops. I couldn't help it. I laugh. Are you serious, lady? My friend is trying to talk to me, but the officer just says, Ma'am, can you come here so I can get your side and settle this? I tell my friend I'll call her back and go talk to the officer. He keeps me away from the entitled mother, but I can still see and hear her. I, briefly, explain what happened. I told him I believed what she was doing to her son was abusive, and that it was not okay. The cop asked for specifics, and I told him what I saw and heard her threaten. But before the cop can say anything, the entitled mother yells, I'm his mother. I can discipline as I see fit. I can beat him if I want. Again, I'm wide-eyed with her wording, still using beating, not spanking, and the cop looks just as shocked. If you'd like, my manager is inside. His name is X, and he can show you the cameras. And this store actually has microphones so you can hear what she says. I admit that I refused service and called her abusive, but that's it. I never touched her. Entitled mother, still yelling. See? She admits to verbally assaulting me and refusing me service because of who I am. Arrest her. The cop sighs, looks at his partner and nods. He looks at me and says, Okay, you can go. I'm going to give you this card with an email. You can send your statement there too about what happened. The cop turns to the lady, and I see the other cop has his hand on the entitled mother, saying something to her. I'm assuming it was about her being arrested or investigated, because she then shouted, No, I did nothing wrong. She should be charged, not me. I'm his mom and can do what I want. She tries to leave, and while one has his hand on her arm, the other stops her. She instantly backs down and goes inside with one of the officers. The other stays with the kids and husband, who hadn't said anything throughout all this, just looking at the ground. I couldn't resist. Before she was out of earshot, I yelled, Have a good day, Karen. The cop turned and gave me that look of don't push your luck. I shrugged and got in my car and called my friend back to tell her what happened. When I got back to work on Sunday, I asked my manager what happened. He said he showed the video and made a report. Mom got arrested, and we were told CPS would be getting involved more than likely. I really hope that the dad is a good parent and she's the only abusive one. I hope those kids get a better life, and I hope that poor boy knows he did nothing wrong. I'll update if I hear any more from the cops about the case. Story 4. When I was a freshman in college, I took my first office job working for a large company doing contract work for a partially owned subsidiary in the mobile phone industry. It was the 90s, and the world of mobile phones was in its days of every local telco still being separate from the divestiture when they broke up Ma Bell. You had tons of available companies to choose from instead of the big four and their MVNOs. Coverage maps looked like someone sneezed on them instead of the coverage you had now. There was no data, no text, and 100 voice minutes was enough for most anybody. It was the Wild West in telecom. The job paid well enough, and the hours allowed me to go to my classes. The job was fairly easy. We were tasked with activating new accounts. This required us to run credit checks and collect deposits when necessary. In the spring and summer things were relatively calm. The only rule that really upset me was that we were not allowed to read anything outside the company intranet during downtime, and this meant I couldn't knock out coursework. No big. Come November, they wanted us to work more and more overtime to ramp up for the upcoming holiday season. This I could not do as I was hanging on balancing a full course load in addition to working the requisite 40 hours. They instituted a demand for at least 10 hours overtime a week. We were a small part of the building as we took up less than half of one of the 4 floors and were the only company there that was not a defense contractor. The contractors were all pretty cool, even if the MPs on floors 3 and 4 were a bit tough, and they were nice to talk to on breaks. We had no room to expand. The office was also only open from 8 and 2. Because of the demand for overtime, they instituted desk sharing, but because they still didn't have enough desks, they couldn't seat everybody. I worked days, and they wanted me to stay until 19. This meant that the person with whom I shared a desk that would normally start at 1300 had no place to sit, and as they were also expected to work the overtime, so they would show up 2 hours early and sit in the break room until I left. I couldn't understand why they would pay this guy 2 hours of base pay and 2 hours overtime to sit in the break room and twiddle their thumbs, but they determined that would be better than having me get out on time. Eventually, I had to tell them I was quitting since I couldn't do the demanded overtime. I left and figured that was that. They called back 2 days after I left and asked if I would come back to work. I said I would on the condition that I would not be expected to work the overtime, and they said we would talk about it when I came back in. I showed up and they pulled me aside and said that they still needed me to do the overtime. I told them that it was impossible and that there was no point in having asked me back if I had to work it. We were at an impasse, so I quit for the second time within a week. The company started asking for more and more overtime for the remaining employees. A bunch of these folks had families, and it was to their delight that they were then being offered hundreds of dollars in bonuses for breaking certain overtime thresholds. Their kids would have the best holidays of their lives, cars were being paid off early, and down payments for mortgages were racking up. Come January, the overtime is gone, as there was no need for it. People are settling back into their former routines and payday arrives. From my friends that stayed working there, they said that the envelopes were opened, and there were audible gasps coming from across the floor. Paychecks were being issued for $0 to a large number of employees. One got a paycheck for 15 cents. The shock quickly turns to anger, and the floor erupts. Management came out and addressed everybody and told them that the bonuses they offered were not approved by the company and that the money had to be reclaimed. People were expected to work and collect checks for no money until the bonuses they were overpaid were paid back to the company, and that anybody that left would be sued by the company for the outstanding balance. They even told one guy that he was lucky enough to have a job there at all since they normally only hired people with diplomas, and he was a dropout without a JED. A number of those employees were still friends and relayed all this to me. I had just started a new job working as third-party support for a portion of the company to which I was previously contracted and did night hours to coincide with my new classes. I asked if they minded if I referred some contacts to them if it would get this resolved, and they said it was fine. I then spoke with a few people that I knew with the defense contractors who were able to refer me to friends they had that worked with the IRS, since they would be very interested. What with it kicking off a new tax year, I explained to the IRS what happened and provided them with a contact of my friends. 1 month later, after an investigation, the full force of the government came down upon the company. The IRS came in and demanded to speak with everybody that made the decision to withhold pay from employees to rescind the bonuses. It was eventually determined that everybody above a certain level was complicit in the scheme and would be held to account by being forced out and facing potential jail time. The company was informed that all the monies would be repaid to those from whom it was taken. Anybody that quit so they could get a job that would give them a paycheck in the meantime was to be offered their job back and, should they refuse to take it, would be issued full-time back pay from the date of their departure. They also determined that the company would either have to fire all those responsible or the company would be responsible for penalties that were obscenely high. The company thought they had their ace in the hole when they said that without the managers being allowed to stay on, they would have to close the call center. They were informed that closing it was fine since the final stipulation was that all employees that were not involved in the scam would either be offered the chance to move to the office they had a county over or would be offered very generous severance packages. The company opted to move the employees and shut the call center. Plea bargains were made. Everyone but the offenders went home happy.